Have you ever been watching a movie or a TV show and the music in the scene you're watching hits you in a certain way? Does the music heighten the emotion of the scene? Or does the music speak to the actions of the characters? Or does the music even suggest some sort of deeper symbolism? It is for these reasons and more that Matt, aka Nando, from the channel Nando V Movies, has started the One Musical Scene playlist and has encouraged others to participate. How? Pick a favorite musical moment from any movie or TV show, make a video talking about it, and upload it to YouTube with the title One Musical Scene. Now, what is my one musical choice? Well, Ride of the Valkyries from the graphic novel Watchmen. Now, I know it's an odd choice from, pictures and words, but trust me, it'll make sense. I'll explain it to you. Just open up your mind's ear. I'll show you why I chose it, okay? Let's get on into it. Let's first talk about the song. Ride of the Valkyries is the opening number of Act 3 of the Richard Wagner opera Die Walküre. The number itself was first performed fully orchestrated in March 1856. Ride of the Valkyries has since appeared in numerous films such as The Great Dictator, Apocalypse Now, and, of course, the film adaptation of Watchmen. It's in the film Watchmen, of course, as a reference to the song being in the graphic novel, and possibly as a reference to Apocalypse Now as well. I mean, it does play during a Vietnam War montage after all. Although the Vietnam War did end a little differently in Watchmen.
I mean, if we'd lost this war, I don't know. I think it might have driven us a little crazy, as a country. But thanks to you, we didn't, right?
Alright, now let's get to the scene. In the graphic novel of Watchmen, the character Hollis Mason, who was a retired police officer and masked adventurer, had written an autobiography about his upbringing and his exploits as Night Owl. Excerpts from the book, titled Under the Hood, are shown at the end of a couple chapters throughout Watchmen. At the beginning of the first excerpt, Mason recites some advice given to him by a writing friend on how to write the book. She states, "Start off with the saddest thing you can think of, and get the audience's sympathies on your side." And the saddest thing that Hollis Mason could think of is, you guessed it, the song Ride of the Valkyries. Mason does acknowledge that, quote, "Nobody else on the planet has to brush away a tear when they hear that particular stirring refrain." But Mason does, and that is because of his father's old boss, Mo Vernon. Mo ran an auto repair place in New York in the late 20s, and Hollis's father got enough work there to support the family. Mason would occasionally help out his father at work, and that's how we got to know Mo. Mo was something of an opera buff, but also had a fondness for tasteless novelty items. Items ranging from fake dog poop to suggestively shaped salt and pepper shakers. Mo found humor not in these items themselves, but in the fact that a grown man such as Mo Vernon enjoyed them so much. Well, one morning, there was an incident involving Mo and one of these novelty items. Let's read from the excerpt to see what happened. Under the Hood by Hollis Mason. Page 3. Anyway, one day in 1933, a little after my 17th birthday, I was over at Vernon's Auto Repairs with Dad, helping him poke around in the oily innards of a busted-up Ford. Mo was in his office, and, although we didn't find out till later, he was sitting wearing an artificial foam rubber set of realistically painted ladies' bosoms, with which he hoped to get a few laughs from the guy who brought him the morning mail through the front office when it arrived. While he waited, he was listening to Wagner. The mail arrived in due course, and the guy handing it over managed to raise a dutiful chuckle at Mo's generous cleavage before leaving him to open and peruse the morning's missives. Among these, again, we found out later, there was a letter from Mo's wife, Beatrice, informing him that for the past 2 years she'd been sleeping with Fred Motts, the senior and most trusted mechanic employed at Vernon's Auto Repairs, who, unusually, hadn't shown up for work on that particular morning. This, according to the concluding paragraphs of the letter, was because Beatrice had taken all the money out of the joint account she shared with her husband and had departed with Fred to Tijuana. The first anyone in the workshop knew about this was when the door of Mo's office slammed open and the startlingly loud and crackling rendition of Ride of the Valkyries blasted out from within. Framed in the doorway with tears in his eyes and the crumpled letter in his hand, Mo stood dramatically with all eyes turned towards him. He was still wearing the set of artificial breasts. Almost inaudible above the rising strains of Wagner swelling behind him, he spoke with so much hurt and outrage and offended dignity, fighting for possession of his voice, that the end result was almost toneless. Fred Motts has had carnal knowledge of my wife Beatrice for the past 2 years. He stood there in the wake of his announcement, the tears rolling down over his multiple chins to soak into the pink foam rubber of his bosom, making tiny sounds in his chest and throat that were trampled under the hooves of Valkyries and lost forever. And everybody started laughing. Now, the workers would later apologize to Mo for laughing so hard, but there's something about the contrasting image of a distraught grown man with a well-rounded bosom realizing his failings as a husband while intense operatic music playing that is kind of freaking hilarious. Mo Vernon ultimately disagreed. Although he stoically accepted his workers' apology and even sent them home early, Mo would end up running a hose from the tailpipe of one of the cars in the shop through its window and turning the vehicle on, taking his own life. Mo had ended his life in the very thing he spent his working days committed to repairing. So, what does this all mean? To me, this scene sets the tone and brings up themes that would run through the rest of the Watchmen graphic novel. Themes like irony, and contradiction. Of course, the irony in the scene we just talked about comes from the differing perspectives of both Mo Vernon and his workers. Mo, being too distraught from the letter from his wife, did not think to take off the fake breasts or turn down his music, and his workers, having no knowledge of the letter nor the fake breasts, laughing at the image of a large-breasted man crying to the tune of Ride of the Valkyries. This reminds me of a quote that is attributed to Mel Brooks. "Tragedy is when I cut my finger. Comedy is when you fall into an open sewer and die." When tragedy strikes, you can either say, "Why me?" or "I'm glad that's not me," with very little in between. A small example of this kind of irony comes early in Watchmen when Laurie and Dan are reminiscing of their crime-fighting days. Admittedly, I really like Patrick Wilson's delivery from the film adaptation.
I remember that crazy guy. What do you call himself? Captain Carnage. He used to pretend he was a supervillain just so he could get beat up all the time.
Yeah, he tried that on me once. I just walked away. He starts following me down the street in broad daylight, yelling, "Punish me! Punish me!" I'm just saying no. Get lost.
God, whatever happened to him?
Oh, well, he pulled out on Rorschach, and Rorschach dropped him down an elevator shaft.
Oh my God. Oh, that's not even funny.
A little funny.
Sometimes people don't see the irony in their lives because they can't, or outright refuse to, see the whole picture. Like Laurie Jupiter, for example. She frequently complains to Dr. Manhattan that he doesn't see life from her perspective.
None of it ever meant a damn thing anyway. I mean, these, my mother's clippings, her whole life, right there. What's it mean? In your terms, next to a neutrino, next to something you can't even see, for Christ's sake, it means nothing. Laurie, don't Laurie me. It's pointless debating when you obviously don't see anything terribly miraculous in life. Maybe quantum physics doesn't allow miracles. No, thermodynamic miracles are... Oh, for God's sake, John, just land this thing, now.
When they finally have their meeting on Mars, Dr. Manhattan rebuttals and says that Laurie has not been viewing life from his perspective.
Jesus, John. Laurie, you complain, perhaps rightly, that I won't see existence in human terms, but you yourself refuse to consider my viewpoint, letting your emotions blind you.
When Laurie finally does so, she finally realizes that Edward Blake is her father. This revelation, in turn, helps Dr. Manhattan regain faith in humanity again, comparing the circumstances of Laurie's birth to a thermodynamic miracle.
You've just been saying life is meaningless, so how can... I changed my mind. But why? Thermodynamic miracles. Events with odds against, so astronomical they're effectively impossible, like oxygen spontaneously becoming gold. I long to observe such a thing, and yet in each human coupling, 1,000 million sperm vie for a single egg. Multiply those odds by countless generations against the odds of your ancestors being alive, meeting, siring this precise son, that exact daughter, until your mother loves a man she has every reason to hate, and of that union, of the 1,000 million children competing for fertilization, it was you, only you, that emerged. To distill so specific a form from that chaos of improbability, like turning air to gold, that is the crowning unlikelihood, the thermodynamic miracle.
Lastly, the biggest piece of irony that Watchmen has to give us is none other than the comedian himself, Edward Blake. He saw how truly awful the world was and decided to laugh in its face. Even his colleagues would speak to his contradicting nature.
I'm in Saigon, being reintroduced to Edward Blake, the comedian. He works mostly for the government now. I suppose I do too. Blake is interesting. I have never met anyone so deliberately amoral. He suits the climate here. The madness, the pointless butchery. As I come to understand Vietnam and what it implies about the human condition, I also realize that few humans will permit themselves such an understanding. Blake's different. He understands perfectly. And he doesn't care.
Strange. Blake understood. Treated it like a joke, but he understood. He saw the true face of the 20th century and chose to become a reflection, a parody of it. No one else saw the joke. That's why he was lonely.
Despite his cynical and violent nature, this facade would soon crack as the comedian learns of Adrian Veitz's plan.
I mean, what's funny? What's so goddamn funny? I don't get it. Somebody explain. Somebody explain it to me.
What he once thought was a joke would end up throwing him out the window of a high-rise building. Tragically. This incident would leave behind Watchmen's most iconic and ironic image, the bloody smiley button. You know, this reminds me of a joke. A man goes to a doctor, says he's depressed, says life seems harsh and cruel, says he feels all alone in a threatening world where what lies ahead is vague and uncertain. Doctor says treatment is simple. Great clown Pagliacci is in town tonight. Go see him. That should pick you up.
Man bursts into tears. Says, but doctor, I am Pagliacci. Good joke. Everybody laugh. Roll on snare drum. Curtains.
Hey everyone, thank you for making it through my video talking about Watchmen and Ride of the Valkyries in my One Musical Scene video. I am really glad that that the Watchmen motion comic videos were available to help me with certain talking points in my video. And yeah. Oh, by the way, I made another one of these about the film adaptation of Watchmen and a musical scene in there. So I'll link that somewhere, either on the screen or in the thing down below. And I'll also make sure to link to the playlist of other people who did the One Marvelous Scene thingy. I've also got other random stuff on my channel. If you want to check it out, I won't force you, but I'd recommend it if it's nothing like this stuff at all. But anyways, yeah, well, thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking through, and I'll see you when I do something else, maybe. Bye.